Hello, Larry Lee with Brownfield Ag News Network. Mark Cournoyer, John Eron, Ken Schroeder joining us from Portage County, Wisconsin. And wild parsnip is becoming a big problem throughout the state and much of the Midwest. And Ken, first of all, what are we going to look at down here in this ditch?
So we're going to look at some pretty yellow flowers. This time of year, wild parsnip is blooming and it's got some nice yellow flowers, but you really don't want to touch them because you get the sap on your bare skin anywhere, and you will have blisters. It's like a chemical burn, but it happens in the presence of sunlight. So it's
Phytophotodermatitis.
Thank you, John. I haven't reviewed my lessons lately, and there's a big word that basically means that you get the sap on your skin and the sun UV rays shine on it, and it's going to blister.
John, you've met some people and had some of your own farm workers get close to this stuff and have problems.
Yeah, unfortunately this plant, we saw a bunch of it get into some first crop hay here and there in spots. It just, most of it's creeping in off the roadways and getting into the farm fields. But we've had a lot of issues with town workers. Fortunately, not locally, but in southern Wisconsin, there's a lot of township employees. They would come through here. Let's say it's morning time, and you kind of got a little bit of a dew on the, on the road ditches. Anyhow, they'll come through, do a mowing with an open station cab, and you just get this stuff, get it mixed, basically airborne in that mist. And there's many people have had, second-degree chemical burns on any exposed skin. So we've heard even stories back from some folks that have worked on the mowers directly after they've gone into a patch of this stuff, comes back to the shop, maintenance crew goes in there to take care of something, say they hit a rock or whatnot, was the reason they came back for repairs. And they got in, got to work on it, and unfortunately got those oils and pieces of that plant on them, and it caused a reaction.
How do you take care of a wild parsnip problem?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. The number one thing to do is actually do something. Ken's going to give us a little demonstration here with a small area how to actually kill a plant that's growing. If you've got it where it's actually flowered out, that the seeds have turned a darker color like a brown, that they're viable seed, we do recommend be suited up something similar to how Ken is, and then to take a bag, simply put a bag over the top and cut it with something, because those seeds at that point, we don't want those to be reintroduced into the area. We actually need to remove the seeds and dispose of them. A plant like what we have here that Ken's going to remove, at this point in time it's just starting to flower, so we can simply by going in there, taking something like a shovel and cutting it 2 to 3 inches below the soil surface, we'll cut off the carbohydrates and it'll kill that plant. So that's what Ken's going to demonstrate for us here.
So one of the things we also look at is as we're walking out on our rural roads and things like that, we have a lot of pollinators, whether it's clover, we have daisies that the kids might be picking, or they're looking for caterpillars and milkweed and things like that. And these are simple things that we do on a normal basis because we are in Wisconsin and these are fun things for kids to do in the summertime. But these are also the things that we worry about with having this invasive here as close as we can see here, because there is milkweed within 2 feet of this plant here, and then also littered out around through the edge here where there's a bunch of young plants. So that's the other thing to take into consideration, is knowing how to identify it and then also being proactive as far as not going in there. And so this is going to be quite something, because it is a turnip and you're going to see a heck of a taproot on this plant.
And the great part about it is, being that Mark and I were smart enough to wear shorts, that means Ken gets to go and do the work.
Ken has the pants and the gloves, and he's suited for this today.
Exactly right. So, and you know what else? So I think we're going to pick a different plant because there's poison ivy in there. I'm not dealing with that. All kinds of good stuff. So let's go across the way here, because my wife is a little sensitive to that stuff. So we're not kind of. So let's go down here, and you can see they get pretty tall. I mean they can be as tall as I am, up to 6 feet tall. And so this time of year, again, they're just flowering. They have this yellow flower. It's a good identifier. If you have that same type of flower, flat top, and it's white flowers, it's not wild parsnip, so we don't need to worry about that. So let's dig a plant up and see what we've got. I'm not going to dig to get all the roots, but give you an idea. It is related to the garden parsnip. So we're going to find out it does have a tap root on it. Oopsie. Okay, it's a good thing I've got
the right clothing on, Ken.
that's right. Pull it out here, tease it apart a little bit. There we go. And there's that tap root, just like a garden parsnip. It's a little smaller right now because it's went through and it's pushing up the flower stalk to produce seed. So again, this is its food reserve here. So it's using that up. And that's what determines when it's going to flower, is when that root is big enough that it can support this kind of growth.
Oh,
And there you have it.
so at this stage, it's best to dig them out or to capture the flower? What's the best way to get rid of it now?
Well, kind of simple. You don't even have to dig it that deep. You can just take the shovel and slice it like that. And then, you know, and you don't have to grab it. But if you just take it, slice it an inch or two below the soil surface, and it's going to die because it doesn't have access to that taproot anymore. That what's down below is not going to produce another plant, so it's basically done at that point. So if you've just got a small patch, probably the best way to approach it. Get out there with a shovel, make sure you got gloves, long sleeves on, and just slice and lift it out, and it's done.
Now, to Mark's point, these wild parsnips, like this, are very close to the other attractive plants like these daisies, and you need to educate those kids about where to go and where not to go, right, Mark?
Right, and so that's one of the things that, as parents, this is not the same as the wild parsnip. And so, but being able to identify, just like when we're looking at poison ivy, leaves of 3, let it be, and other noxious weeds that are going to cause irritations, we want to make sure that we keep an eye on our road ditches. We want to make sure that they're not going down in the ditch, and identifying those areas that they might be picking a daisy in or something like that. Obviously, you're going to have something like this growing in your yard. It's going to be a different story, but out here where everything grows wild on town roads, and if you pan over here, you can see there's patches there, and there's nothing growing in there. But if you come, you know, another 8 feet closer to you, there's stuff just growing intermittently in here. So just something to be aware of. John, you know, he touched on a lot of the different dangers as far as these oils and things like that. And the pictures that you see, they are some of the most gruesome, I mean, blisters that just rise up a ½ inch, 3/4 inch off of your arm with that phytodermatitis. It's gruesome.
And a big thing to be concerned about with this parsnip, right now people are noticing it because of the yellow flower, if they can recognize that. But the oils from the plant are just as dangerous in its first year. So these plants are technically classified as a monocarpic perennial, but they kind of throw them in the same classification as a biennial plant. So you'll get the rosette the first year, and then on the second to third year, depending on growing conditions, is when it'll go into the reproductive stage. So you may get, if we actually look down in here, we may find a bunch of rosettes. Those are just as dangerous as the plant that we can visually see. So you could be out in a ditch lane picking some flower or something like that and run into a bunch of these rosettes and not know that you've come across those. So a lot of extra precaution needs to be done. We've got some great websites. Both Portage and Wood County websites have a lot of information on these, on the wild parsnip in particular. There's a few other websites that have been linked to that, but we do recommend, if you got any questions or believe you've seen anything like this, if you would go on one of the county websites, either Portage or Wood County, you can look that up. I believe Ken's actually linked a bunch of information, so crews that go out and do work and stuff, that do tree trimming, things like that, we've actually got a printable truck card that we recommend that you print out for all the guys working out there to have in their vehicle. It's a quick index card for just doing identification on this stuff. Big thing to keep in mind, different than poison ivy causes an allergic reaction. So some people may be very sensitive to it. Some folks it really doesn't bother them. this causes an actual chemical reaction. So it's going to get everybody every time. That's a really big concern we got to be aware of. And
not just people, but animals.
Not just people, just animals. Unfortunately, the last 2 years here, last year in particular, with a lot more people doing recreational things, and they're going out more camping and stuff. There's some dogs that have gotten into these plants and gone back and, you know, as any family pet would do, lick the owners, lick the children. Unfortunately, they transferred this chemical onto the hands and faces of some young children, and we've got some, you know, very, very sad reports of seeing second-degree burns on children.
This is an invasive plant that came apparently from Europe many years ago, but still not listed as a pest plant here in the state or most areas of the U.S., right?
That is correct. So in Portage and Wood County, several years back, we looked at it and we had it deemed noxious. So by having it classified as noxious, anybody that is a landowner, by law, you are required to do control measures with it. So control is whether you're doing cutting or, you know, ideally just a full-out eradication is by far recommended. But if you are a landowner and you have the stuff in your property, you are required to do some type of control with it.
That's locally in these two counties.
That's locally, that's in both Portage and Wood County.
But the state has no regulation at this point.
Nope. Unfortunately, the state hasn't done anything with it. They know it's an issue, but you know, things have gotten to the point that they say it's too far out of hand. And us here in central Wisconsin, we decided to step up and do what we can to hold this at bay. We look at other counties. I've heard upwards as high as 30 plus work comp claims in a single individual county here 2 years ago. Fortunately, we haven't had anything major here in central Wisconsin, but that's got a lot to do with getting out there, being proactive, teaching people about what the concerns are, and just how dangerous these plants are to keep people hopefully away from them, and working with the townships to help as far as the correct timings and stuff when we want to be out mowing, what to look for, and then ideally a lot of our volunteers, we try to stay ahead of the town or county mowers as far as spraying it and or knocking some plants out, because one of the biggest reasons how this stuff moves is by mechanical means. So you start getting some viable seed, a town mower or county mower comes through, and they'll actually spread those seeds. They'll ride on that mower deck, and then as you see, we're having stuff show up in the corners here by them stop signs. What's happening is that mower, the seeds will ride on that mower deck. You get to the stop sign, you lift up, and the seeds fall off. That's typically why we're seeing them mostly by these intersections. They tend to grow from there out.
Now, there's mowing, there's chemical treatment. You mentioned putting a bag over the seed heads and getting them out of there. Are there other ways to treat this as well, and certain times of the year to use certain things?
And as you saw, Ken actually went in there with a shovel. That is absolutely effective. It's just sometimes in areas, there's too much of it. There's simply too much of it to be effective with a shovel. So we do have some options that we recommend. By far, a broadleaf chemical is the best way to go. We don't recommend using Roundup unless it's on private property and just in small patches. We'd prefer not to see, you know, areas of a ditch line sprayed with non-selective like a Roundup, because that would obviously kill everything, and then we could have some erosion issues with the ditch line and stuff. So things like, you know, any type of broadleaf chemical is very effective at killing this thing. Problem is, you know, you look at the height of the plant already. We're seeing it flowering. We could be anywhere 3 to 4 feet tall. Typically, your chemicals need to be used before the plant gets about a foot tall or so. So there's some concerns with, you know, timing of your chemical application. But the big thing is know what it is, where it is, and do what you can to be safe.
I've heard some people confuse wild parsnip with other plants like mustard. There's a big difference.
Yep. Well, the closest plant that looks like it would be Queen Anne's lace. It's almost identical in appearance with a few small changes. Instead of being a yellow top, Queen Anne's lace is a white top. And the wild parsnip, if you get up close on the stalks, it's actually got a fluted stalk.
Best advice, avoid them if you don't know what you're touching.
Avoid them. We do recommend that, especially if you're in Portage and Wood County, that if you find patches of this, that you would call into the county. They should have on the website, should have a number to use to call in. We're actually mapping this, and what's really great is in central Wisconsin, we've had enough volunteers calling in with where sites are that now instead of going out and broad acre spraying these ditch lines, we've got a company out there coming out with guys in backpacks and using the GPS coordinates given to us by local volunteers. And even if you just got a local house number, or even an intersection, like right now we're on an intersection of White Pine and Maple, simply call that into the township or the county, and they'll make a note of that, and we're actually tracking how much we've treated. I'm pleased to say we've got some areas that we believe we've actually achieved eradication on it, that we're 5 years out with no new plants. So the more help we get from the general public, the more efficient we can be at controlling this plant.
I understand other counties are calling to ask about what you're doing here.
Yeah, we get we get a lot of calls from outside of central Wisconsin here, just asking ways to go about it. We typically direct them to our website. When possible, I try to make myself available to come out and give some presentations on it, but there's a lot to learn about this plant in particular, and you know, if you think you've seen it somewhere, we just ask that you call in and report it.
So Ken Schroeder, find out more about this. What is the website people should go to?
Yeah, go to the Portage County UW Extension website, and then look on the Ag drop-down menu, and I think it's probably the second line on there. We'll talk about wild parsnip, and click on that. And we've assembled management suggestions. As John was talking about, the small truck cards you can print out for quick on-the-go ID for workers and anybody individually. So we tried to assemble some good resources for people to not only help with identification but management as well. So when the plants are young, they remind me a little bit of a cluster of celery. You know, see the compound leaves coming off and of a base, and so it's just, again, growing in there amongst all the grasses and stuff. It's almost hard to see, but once you know what it is, it's easy enough to identify. This one probably isn't going to flower this year because it hasn't developed a big enough tap root. Again, look over here, this patch of grass growing here, and right there we are. There's a young wild parsnip plant growing up. Let's take a little closer look here. Down there, it's just leaflet, leaves coming up off the base. Again, so that's got to go through and photosynthesize, build up that tap root so that then next year it has enough energy to put up a flowering stalk and then produce seed. Once this plant matures and produces seed, this plant, individual plant itself, will die. But again, it's just spread hundreds to 1,000 seeds around, and so you get the little ones coming up around it from, you know, so it's not a one and done. I can take this plant out, you know, like we showed you, kill that plant. That plant isn't going to grow, it's not going to produce any seed, but all the little ones down here are going to be back next year. So you really need to do multiple years once you see an outbreak to keep on top of it. But again, if it's a small patch, you know, a shovel and you can manage it. You know, you don't need chemicals in that case, but once it gets bigger, then we've got to look towards some of those chemical options to deal with it.
Ken Schroeder is the Portage County University of Wisconsin Extension Agent. Mark Cournoyer from Auburndale is an ag educator and FFA instructor. John Eron, farmer in this area, as well as with the Farmers of Mill Creek watershed. Any last words, gentlemen?
Be on the lookout for those yellow flowers this time of year. It's easy to identify and report where they are.
Report. Let people know. You know what it looks like now. Let these people know what it looks like, where you found it, and get those reports in so it can get taken care of, and be safe if you are treating it yourself.
And the number one thing to control in this thing is actually getting out there and doing something with it. But just the average citizen, if they see this, to call it in and report it, it really makes things more efficient, so we can come out there and have volunteers and or somebody hired through the county to spot spray it, instead of us having to spray long corridors. So if you care about native plants and integrity of the wildlife around here, the better you can help us to be accurate with and where we spray, all the better.
And for those people living outside of Portage and Wood County, treatment's the same. Look for the same things and be careful. Thanks for joining us today on Brownfield.